me, it's about having an attitude and mentality where I continually try to improve myself, right? And being honest with myself about that self-improvement. Yeah. Because a lot of people say, oh, I love self-improvement. I love self-improvement. However, they don't really take criticism that well.
Mhm.
Right? Or they don't actually apply what they learn, right? Because we learn a lot, but how much do we actually apply?
Mhm.
And so for me, it's about learning and then application to improve myself, right? Because I want to, but also because I have to for my teammates and for the people around me.
Hi everyone, this is Anthony Ngo, and welcome to another episode of my interview series. Today I'm joined by Nguyen. Tin has had an interesting career, and what seems to tie everything together is his sense of duty to protect his community in some way, shape, or form. He's had a career in the military where he served in Iraq and Afghanistan. He was a lead case agent in the FBI and specialized in violent gangs and counterterrorism. He held a COO position at an edtech startup, was a VP of operations at a cybersecurity company, and is now a founder and CEO of his own cybersecurity company, Polaris Infosec. With that being said, welcome, Tin.
Thanks, Anthony.
Um, so I kind of want to learn more about like your challenges of running a company, your take on leadership, and how you build your teams, and general practical advice. But before that, I kind of want to know a little more about your backstory, how you made the leap from the FBI agent to and like dealing with violent gangs to working in ed tech and in Asia of all places. And I guess you could kind of tie that in with like what you're currently working on as well.
Sure. I mean, if you take a look at the history of what I've done in terms of my professional career, it's always been some kind of contribution to the community, purely because that's how I derive value and kind of purpose in life is just kind of having an impact on the people around me. And so that's always been very important to me. So it started with, the military and then the FBI. But I will tell you that the government work, the military work, it does put you in a box. And so it does, in my opinion, stifle creativity to a certain degree. And so my decision to leave government work was about discovery. It was about discovering what I could do, like getting out of my comfort zone because government work is pretty comfortable, right?
Mm.
And so even as an FBI agent. So I made the leap to the startup world, to entrepreneurship, because that's where you can be a part of something from the ground level all the way through its hopefully its fruition and its growth. Yeah. And so in terms of education and cybersecurity, the whole ed tech thing was kind of an experiment for me in the terms of the private industry. And so I discovered very quickly, while it's important, that specific industry wasn't a passion for me. And so that's why I pivoted to cybersecurity, where now I'm kind of back in an area where I have a little familiarity, right? Security in one way, shape, or form. Security people hear and then they think about like security guards. They think about like, guys with guns and stuff like that, like cops and that sort of thing. But security is about how you make people feel comfortable. It's how you enable people to live their lives, how they build their businesses, how they live with their families and build their families and grow their families in a way that they don't have to worry about risks and dangers. And so cybersecurity is really just an extension of that, of what I used to do, just in a different battlefield, if you would.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, it kind of makes sense that I feel like you're kind of going full circle with like where your career kind of started and then like coming back into like an industry that's also related with like security and like helping others and stuff like that. Just kind of more on like the, I guess, digital forefront, I guess.
Yeah, exactly right.
Okay. Um, Key decisions. So you kind of mentioned in another interview and just like right now that making this leap over to Asia, it's like you're leaving a comfortable position in the FBI and moving more towards uncharted territory. Jeff Bezos says, as an executive, you get paid to make a small number of high quality decisions. So as a decision maker, how do you go about making your calls, and do you have like systems in place? Like how do you do your due diligence, especially now that you're in like more of a leadership position, and you're more responsible for more than just yourself?
Yeah, I guess it really depends on this on what the decision is about, right? Like obviously there's a difference between me choosing what I need to do for lunch this afternoon, and personal decisions, business decisions related to my work. But generally speaking, I would say I trust my gut. I've always kind of trusted my training, education experience, and the advice that I've taken from other people. So I trust my gut in terms of what I feel is a best decision for not just myself, but for the organization. And so it is, a balancing scale of what is at risk with this decision. Sometimes it's just something that's kind of pretty easy and quick, and you can just make a decision because you have experience with this type of situation. But in situations where it's a little more major, I do put a little thought into what the risks are, who's affected, why I need to make it. I think about timelines. So it's like this huge process that I've kind of been able to refine in my head and do it very quickly. And I guess that's the kind of the training from the military and the government. But yeah, so for me, it's like going through this very in-depth process of thinking about not just the immediate impacts of this decision, but all the outliers as well, and how it reverberates like an echo.
Right. Yeah, I imagine that's something that's like really important, especially, as like a startup founder and stuff like that. You have to think about like the big picture and like where you're headed in the long run. So I guess that's something that like I also want to get a better understanding of, and kind of like learn how to make better decisions that are long lasting and stuff like that, not so immediate, or like just focus on immediate impact. With your background in the military and leadership positions in companies, what are some key traits you look for in your teammates, and like what are some red flags that you've kind of like picked up over the years of like working with people, and maybe some non-negotiables that like you, if there are any, that you have whenever you're like trying to work with someone, whether it's like a business partner or like even just like general teammates or like employees for like your company right now?
I can tell you that the one thing that I look for right off the bat is being open-minded. And so what I mean by that is someone who's open-minded is willing to learn, is willing to take criticism, who's willing to accept different situations, willing to do things a different way. And so that's very important, right? Now, whether they're successful in all those things, that's different. That's a different matter. But at the very least, I look for people that aren't egotistical, that aren't selfish, because those aren't healthy for any team, for any environment. You could have a super high performer, but if they're selfish, if they're not a good team player, and they're not open-minded to new ways of doing things, I would rather take someone that's less talented, that is open-minded, because I can grow that person into what I need, right? So being open-minded allows someone to be trainable, allows someone to have that personal growth factor that you can't find in other people sometimes. So that's very, very important to me, is being open-minded.
So it's kind of like having more like a growth mindset, and just like, I guess, I don't know, like not being so closed off with like learning opportunities. I guess you tend to like butt heads with people with strong personality, because I feel like sometimes a strong personality would be good for some work that you're doing, but at the same time, like it might lead to difficulties. I guess it kind of depends on like if you need to make like a decision, and instead of everyone just kind of like waiting for a decision to be made. I guess that's like the benefit of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think when we say strong-minded, strong-headed, I think that there's a negative connotation to it, because you can be strong-minded, you can be opinionated, and you can be strong-headed while still being a strong team player, while still being a contributor, while still being open-minded, right, and even keel. Like I can tell you right now that I'm extremely strong-headed.
Yeah,
if I make a mistake, I'm gonna tell you, hey, I made a mistake, and I'm sorry, and I apologize, right? If someone has a better idea, I'm gonna say, you know what, that's a great idea, but that doesn't mean that I'm not gonna tell you my opinion, right? That's not gonna, as a CEO, you're gonna have to be strong-headed, strong-minded to control and lead a team. So I just don't want to get it twisted that being strong-minded and strong-headed is a negative quality necessarily. I think many times it can be, but I think that given the right situation, given the right person, it can be a very good quality.
Yeah, I completely agree. I guess it would be like finding that balance, or I guess like also having enough awareness and like empathy to kind of like be aware of like, hey, I might be coming off a little too strong, or like,
That's right.
like judging how you interact with like other people and how they like, I don't know, deal with people, I guess.
No, no, you're right though. High empathy and EQ is super important. Super important.
Mhm. Yeah, I remember like when I first started, the previous company, I came off as really blunt, and that kind of sucked to hear. But I also I think I learned from the experience, especially with like the cultural differences and like coming off as like very straightforward and stuff like that, which might be like a turn off to a lot of people actually. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Uh,
agree.
um, how do you cultivate like a strong team? How do you, like, let's say you do find like that person that might not be pulling their weight, or they're struggling, or they're not as collaborative with the rest of your team. Like how do you cultivate like a strong team bond or like camaraderie among your like people?
For me, it's about starting with clear communication, to be honest with you. Um, you know, within startups, within business, leaders have to be strong communicators. And if you're not, then your team's going to suffer. And so for me, it's about how do I set clear expectations? How do I support them and mentor them? Right. And if I do those things, it's going to build a stronger team culture because they're going to be more empowered, more confident about their capabilities, about their jobs.
Mhm.
Right. They're going to be more directed and focused on their work. And so, clear communication, clear expectations, mentorship. One of the problems with a lot of young companies is that we become very task oriented because there's just so much to do. And I'm guilty of this as well, right? You get task oriented. So you say, hey, I need you guys to do this. I need you to do this. I need you to do this without actually explaining it or showing them how to do it, how you need to be done sometimes,
Mhm.
right? And so when you miss that critical step of just taking that extra second to explain something or to show or demonstrate or mentor them through that, now they're having to struggle through it. They're starting to ask questions about, am I doing this right? And when you have that constantly, it develops a negative atmosphere where people become frustrated.
Mhm.
Right? People aren't happy with their work. And so, and then you as a leader, you become toxic too, right? Because then you just become a taskmaster and people stop listening to you, right? And so all these things compound. Yeah, so what it boils down to for me is it starts with clear communication. Yeah.
Yeah, I really appreciate that because like just even before this little interview thing, like you're really clear with your expectations of like what it would be like working at your company, and like, setting realistic expectations for me as like someone coming from the West, like migrating or like transitioning if I were to go into like the East, and like all the differences that I'd have to like face. And um, yeah, so I really appreciate that. I don't think a lot of people would be as transparent and like straightforward with that, because I think it might scare people off by like knowing those things. But at the same time, I think it's a good thing because it allows me to make a good decision for myself, and ultimately like it works for like everyone. If I do agree to like work with you and stuff like that, then I think everyone wins, and there's no like gotcha moments or anything like that. Like
Right.
everyone's pretty upfront. So yeah, I completely agree with that. That's really cool.
I mean, I look at it this way, right? Um, I can sugarcoat things and then you be excited about something. And then if you join my company, then it's like, well, this isn't what Tin said. And then now it's a loss of trust and confidence in me, but then you're not happy, which means that your work isn't good,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Or as good, I should say. Whereas if I'm upfront, you can make that very clear decision upfront, what's best for you. And if you join me, then I know it's because you actually believe in what we do and the environment that you're going to be going into. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I feel like that's something that like not so many people do. And again, like I really appreciate that. And it is helping with like my decision and something that I need to take into account. Um, So you kind of talked about like leadership too, right? Because you don't want to be like micromanaging and like, being like a taskmaster and stuff like that. Um, what do you think makes like a good leader? How do you become one? And, how do you build leaders? Because at some point, as your company scales, as you expand, you don't want to be micromanaging everyone. At some point, you want, to have leaders in place to kind of share your vision and just let them run and like, take the lead on things. So what's your take on leadership?
I can say that. I mean, that's it is a kind of a broad question in general. However, I would say that for me, it's about having an attitude and mentality where I continually try to improve myself, right? And being honest with myself about that self-improvement. Yeah. Because a lot of people say, oh, I love self-improvement. I love self-improvement. However, they don't really take criticism that well.
Mhm.
Right? Or they don't actually apply what they learn, right? Because we learn a lot, but how much do we actually apply? And so for me, it's about learning and then application to improve myself, right? Because I want to, but also because I have to for my teammates and for the people around me. Yeah. I have to be able to take criticism. I have to be able to say that I'm wrong and that I'm sorry. I have to be able to know when I'm not right and then just suck it up, adjust course, and then just make it right. You know, and so that's hard for people. That's hard for leaders, especially people that have been leaders and managers for a long time. And it's also cultural, right? It's also cultural because here in Vietnam, it's a patriarchy. Guys, are not used to other people saying, hey, or younger people even saying, hey, you're wrong. Guys are not used to women saying to another guy, like, hey, you're wrong, or a younger woman saying. And so, it's a cultural factor too. Just additional considerations on leadership.
Yeah, definitely. That makes a lot of sense. I'm coming to that point where I would like to think that I reached a point where I could take criticism pretty well, but I think it's depending on the context and like how it's given, I guess, is also important, right? Criticism.
Huge.
Yeah.
But no, but that's great that you're thinking about that, because how someone speaks to us kind of drives how we respond to them, right? And so it's sometimes someone may not say something in a very tactful way, and we have to kind of just suck it up and be the better person and just be polite. But that's hard. So I get it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely still need to work on that, but I guess that's something I need to consider. So you're now in Saigon, Ho Chi Minh City, as a co-founder and CEO. This is probably a really dumb question, but like, was it smooth sailing to get to where you are? Like, what were some hurdles that you went through, things you weren't prepared for, like overlooked or didn't anticipate?
No, definitely not smooth. And to be honest with you, if it ever is smooth, my opinion is you're not trying hard enough or you're not doing enough. I think there's quotes that are similar to that. But I would say that once you solve one problem, there's always gonna be another problem that rises. Success here means that you start to elevate yourself in certain ways, the company in certain ways, but then more money, more problems, as we used to say, right? More money, more problems. So it's that same thing. No matter where you are, Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, these guys are successful businessmen. But if you just compare them monetarily, yeah, they've got great success. But take a look at everything they also have to deal with. Yeah. And so it's the same on a much smaller scale for me, right? But in terms of learning experiences, just jumping from industry to industry within a foreign environment, with new teams, with heavy expectations on performance, on revenue generation, team growth, plenty to think about.
Okay. And kind of to sum it all up, like your professional career, in terms of your career, like how would you sum up how you got to where you are today? And are there any key decisions that you wish you'd make sooner or maybe like change? Yeah.
I would say that you can't be afraid of making hard decisions, right? Calculate your risks, calculate the rewards, but at the end of the day, sometimes you just got to pull the trigger and do it. And you got to have confidence and faith in yourself and your abilities. And I think that's hard for people. I think people get stuck in these little comfort zones, which I understand. We've all been there, but if you really want change in your life, then you have to be that change, right? I think there's some famous quote that says something like that too, right?
Yeah.
Be the change that you want to see in the world, something like that. But you got to be that change, and it's serious. I mean that though. And if you want to be successful, be part of that 1% or whatever, you have to act like it. Now, will you actually get there? Will I actually get there? I don't know, but I'm going to try.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah.
And you got to try hard. You got to try harder than the people next to you. If there's someone next to you and they're trying harder than you, and you know that, if someone's trying harder than you, then, try harder. It's smarter though. Let me say smarter too. Sometimes trying smarter is better than harder, but you know what I'm saying. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Kind of want to switch gears now more into like your area of expertise. I want to cover, why. I mean, you kind of covered like why you want to do cybersecurity, but maybe reiterate why it's so important, especially like with what's currently happening. We could talk about what just happened with Uber. I think I kind of want to dive into like social engineering in particular, because I think that's the particular way that Uber was compromised.
Yes.
And the way that the everyday person, what the everyday person could do, or if that's something that they should worry about. Because I remember you had the webinar and it was for small businesses and startups, but what about like the everyday person? And
Yeah.
then talk about wrapping up with preventative measures. So yeah.
Yeah. And so I will start by saying that cybersecurity is a growing risk for everybody, not just large organizations, not for small businesses, not just for medium businesses, government. It's for everybody, including personal individuals, right? How many times have you received emails saying, "Hey, I'm the prince from Nigeria. I need your social security information so that I can wire you 5 million." Everybody's received those types of emails.
Mm.
Right? The director of the FBI has emailed me at least 5 times this past year saying, "Hey, I need your help, with this money transfer." And so it affects individuals because people fall for it.
Mm.
Right? These scams keep coming out. These social engineering, these phishing attacks keep happening because people fall for them. Yeah. And so cybersecurity applies to everybody. In terms of Uber, being transparent, I don't know all the details about it. I just know kind of generally what happened. However, yes, social engineering, right? And so for people that don't know exactly what social engineering is, it's the manipulation of people to achieve a certain result. So, for example, manipulating individuals through social media to gain access to their accounts. That's social engineering. Yeah. And so that happens in multiple forms. But I did see something today about how all of a sudden Uber is looking to hire all these new security individuals, right? Because they just had this incident a few days ago or whatever it was. But yeah, Uber specifically, I don't know exactly what the details were, just I haven't done the reading. But social engineering attacks are extremely prevalent and common and are actually incorporated into many other major cyber attacks, such as the Axie Infinity hack last March, right? Largest crypto hack in the world. That was a result of social engineering of one of the developers.
Mm.
They got credentials, were able to access the network. And then once you're in the network, they root around, steal other information, blah, 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 lateral movement, and then eventually find their way to the gold, right? Which in this case happened to be 625 million US dollars worth of Ethereum and US dollar coin.
Yeah, that's pretty wild. Yeah, I kind of did a little reading on Reuters about the whole Uber incident. So the perpetrator basically said, "I announced I am a hacker and Uber has suffered a data breach on someone's Slack account."
Yeah.
So the way they did it was the person who assumed responsibility for the hack sent a text message to one of the Uber employees claiming to be like a corporate IT person.
Yeah.
And then the worker was persuaded to hand over their password and allowed them to basically have access to Uber systems. And then as a result of that, Uber employees were instructed to not use Slack after the incident. So it basically, to me, like as just a complete noob to like the whole cybersecurity and how businesses run. But to me, I think the implication of this is like your whole communication channel for your business for like a couple of days or weeks or whatever, is brought down. And I'm wondering, not wondering, but I assume that costs millions of dollars by not being able to like communicate with your teams and stuff like that in that short amount of time. Yeah, I don't know
Yeah.
if you have something to say about that.
Yeah, the average cost for a data breach these days is over $1 million US dollars. I think in the US, right? It's like 1 point something million US dollars in the US, according to IBM's data breach report from last year. In Southeast Asia, it's even higher. It's like more than double that. The reason that is because you're talking about fees you have to pay for incident response, recovery fees, loss of contracts, customers, business, right? You're talking about now you're buying solutions for cybersecurity, for you're doing training. So that's why the average cost is so high. People don't realize that. Yeah. But it goes much, much higher than that. The losses, financial loss. However, so for Uber, they're using a unified communication system, Slack, which is a very popular tool these days, but very popular for social engineering as well, right? Very popular for social engineering, Slack, but also social media like LinkedIn, because they fool themselves, or they fool individuals through very official messages. These attackers are very complex, right? Even me, when I see something, I have to check it 2-3 times to make sure it's real, because they will set up profiles that have been set up for months with actual connections, with actual companies, with actual like universities and information, so that when you look at it, it's like, okay, this person's legit, when it's not. You have to be very, very careful. Even when you receive emails, you got to check the email address, right? You got to hover over links, all those things. But people don't do that because, one, they're not educated about it, or two, they don't think about it.
I didn't know that I'd have to like even hover over links, but I guess I need to do a lot of more like research on like cybersecurity and stuff like that.
I never click any link unless I hover over it and look at it to make sure that it's something that I believe I trust.
Okay. So how do you, aside from that, like how do you think this is all speculation, by the way, because you kind of mentioned like you don't have enough information on like the whole incident, or you don't have the context, but how would you have prevented this? Or like, I guess you kind of mentioned like education as well, but even for this case, right, they were kind of persuaded by who they thought was like IT person.
Right.
So yeah, what does the feature kind of look like for defense against things like this?
So people automatically assume that when you talk about cybersecurity, you're talking about something that you purchase and you download and then you use it on your computer. Wrong. That's not what cybersecurity is, right? Cybersecurity is an actual practice. It's not a solution. It's not a tech solution. Cybersecurity is a way that you use your technology every single day. That's what cybersecurity is, right? It's the safe and use of cybersecurity, of technology, right? And it's how you integrate that technology into other aspects of your life, right? Because what is also included in cybersecurity is how you access a room with computers or servers, right? That's part of cybersecurity. It's a physical layer of cybersecurity. And so when we talk about cybersecurity, the first thing you should do as a company is training. Mandate training. You do it during the onboarding process for your employees, and then you do it annually or biannually, however often you feel like you need to do, right? Because you have to educate people first and foremost. Now, after they're educated, now you have to enforce it through policies for password use, policies for technology use, accountability, right? For example, my policies for a company, hey, if you leave your desk, you better put your computer in sleep mode. Now, am I worried about some dude jumping on the computer and hacking onto it while they're in the bathroom? I'm not. But like I said, it's habits.
Yeah, I actually want to jump in on that, because that's actually what one of my bootcamp instructors, like, he keeps emphasizing, like, every time you leave your desk, even though we're in the same boot camp and all that stuff, if we're going to lunch, just lock your screen, like always lock your screen no matter what. Interesting. I didn't really understand the importance of it, and maybe I also need to look into that again. So maybe it'd be like a good idea to, because like you mentioned, right, Uber is like looking to hire a bunch of cybersecurity people now after the fact. Maybe it'd be a good idea to kind of like reiterate like why we should take preventative measures beforehand instead of waiting for an incident to occur, and like, I guess, the importance of education as well, and like maybe you know, how people could reach the company and stuff like that, or like resources that you could provide.
So let me ask you this, Anthony. Do you have, or have you ever had car insurance?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have medical insurance?
Yes.
Okay. Now, most people, the answer for most people is going to be yes to those sorts of questions, right? House insurance, rental insurance, fire insurance, earthquake insurance. Why? How often does an earthquake actually happen? How often do people need rental insurance where if someone breaks into their home, they're insured, right? Never.
Yeah.
Hardly never. But why do they have it? People that have medical insurance, how many of them actually go to the hospital and use their insurance? Right? That's another thing too. Not many people, but they have it. Why? In case something happens. Right? Cybersecurity is about in case something happens. That's why you need to prepare beforehand. Except I can tell you that the risk of failure from financial loss, operational loss, brand loss, is drastic, because you're talking about an organization being affected, and it's not just you as a person. You're talking about everybody on your team. You're talking about not just your team. You're talking about the company that does business with you, right? I can tell you an example is in Japan. Earlier this year, a small company was attacked, ransomware or something like that, and they make small car parts, right? A small company like this, no one really cares, right? They resolve the issue, move on with their life. But I can tell you who does care is Toyota, because Toyota purchased these parts for their cars, and because of this small company being attacked in what they call a supply chain attack, the big guy had to shut their factories down for like 2 weeks, and they lost millions of dollars because a part. So my point of this is saying is like these types of insurance, cybersecurity is not always about you. It's about protecting the people around you, right? What happens if you're a company that has a lot of financial data and hacker steals all the data for your customers? Yeah, have fun explaining that to your customers. Hey, man, I lost your social security number, your phone number, your email address, your children's names, like blah, 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 right?
Yeah, yeah. And I think a lot of people, they tend to think about just like the financial losses, but you mentioned before, like the brand loss and like the trust as well, right? Like, which will also like affect your ultimately like your financial losses, because no one will want to do business with you, because like, how could they trust you with all this stuff?
All the work that you put into making your name stand out, gone in a minute.
Right? Okay. Yeah. And then you kind of mentioned like social engineering can also take place through like social media and stuff like that. And one of my classmates, he actually like hopped on this new app called like Be Real. I don't know if you've heard about it. I think it's a terrible idea, like a huge security risk. Because you basically take a picture, a front-facing camera picture and a back-facing camera picture, and sometimes you could even allow like your location. So like it's just a huge risk to me, because you're basically showing anyone where you're at any point in time. I don't expect any high-value person to be like using it, because you could be compromised. But like, do you think there's any place for social media in terms of like business or even for like personal use? Because it's coming to a point where I don't see many benefits aside from like maybe marketing and reaching your customers. But like, yeah, are there any sides to using social media at this point?
I don't think it matters, to be honest with you. My answer doesn't matter. And the reason is because it's not going anywhere. Social media is here to stay. And so it's one of those things where whether we believe in it or not, whether we actually use it or not, it doesn't matter, because we are at the end of the day going to have to learn to live with it and to use it appropriately. Right? Kids, TikTok, Instagram, all the stuff that you and I didn't have when we were like super young, right? Parents have to think about that stuff now. Companies have to think about that now. Facebook, or Meta now has been a lot of hot water over some of their policies, some of their social media stuff, right? And so while my personal view is that social media has its good and its bad, as security experts, for me, I need to think about how to protect people, how to educate them about using social media responsibly. Right.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, so I kind of want to wrap this up. I was wondering if maybe to do like a quick recap of what an everyday person could do to kind of just like preventative measures that they could implement like right now to use. And then maybe any messages that you want to put out there. It could be business related, life advice, anything else. And then how someone could reach you if they want to.
Yeah, so things that people can start doing literally right now, being smart about their communications. Yeah, what I mean by that is, one, let's talk about emails. Check the email addresses that you receive information from. Never send sensitive information over email, right? Personal identification, passwords, credit card information, those sort of things. Don't send it over that, right? Use more secure messaging apps that are encrypted. WhatsApp is encrypted, Signal, Telegram, those sorts of applications. when you're looking at emails, hover over links, right? Just hold the mouse over the link just to check to see you can see. If it's a bunch of jumbled things that you're not sure what it is, if you're not sure what it is, just don't click on it, right? That's simple.
Yeah.
And then simple uses of their computers. Hey, make sure that you're logging off your computer when you go to places. Like if you're in a cafe, for instance, you're sitting there and you go to the bathroom, make sure you just shut your laptop screen, right? Simple things like that. Use VPNs when connecting to company resources. You can download free VPNs just through the App Store or whatever. Those are virtual private networks, which kind of set up an encrypted tunnel for your traffic as you use the internet and connect to other resources. So VPNs. And then if you are a business leader, think about how you prepare for an incident, a cyber incident, right? There's a lot of not expensive cyber solutions out there that you integrate, but also think about how you do policy, how you conduct training, right? And if anyone has any questions about that stuff, I will give that advice free and help give you stuff that you can use to build your programs for free. Absolutely. Yeah. And so people can reach out to me on LinkedIn or my website. If you just look up Polaris, like the star Polaris Infosec, you should be able to find me.
Okay, cool. So yeah, if anyone wants to learn more about cybersecurity, contact him. He's your guy. I definitely learned a lot, and there's definitely a lot more that I need to look into, especially after this conversation. I probably made a lot of mistakes with some of my email communications in the past. Hopefully, I'm not compromised or anything like that. So yeah, Tin, thank you for your time and for sharing your insights. Hopefully, I'll see you around sometime in Asia or somewhere in Asia.
You got it. Thanks, Anthony.
Yeah, cool. Thanks, Tin.
You got it.